recording.
I saw that. That's why I stopped.
I was like, I'm gonna start recording this. It's gonna be fun. Alright, are you ready?
No, my dog is trying to tackle me. Kaya, lay down. Or at least sit. Okay.
Are you good? Are you ready?
Yes, I'm good for now.
I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
Alright, today, ladies and gentlemen, we have our very first special episode. And this is our Cedar Point special.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do basically a rundown of every coaster in the park. Gabe will probably go through the lineup that we have, and we'll sort of delve deeper into what we think are the highlights of the park. And we're also going to go over why we think the roller coaster that we've ranked, which I guess I should explain in case this is someone's first episode. So Matt and Gabe are going over our top 15s right now, and me and him ranked this coaster at the same spot on our lists. And obviously with the premise of our podcast, we can't really compete with the same roller coaster. So instead we decided to do a special episode, and on top of that, we've ranked this coaster as the top one in this park. So we're going to basically duke it out with this coaster against every other coaster in the park.
Yeah, it was the one time that me and you have both 100% agreed on something.
Which is kind of crazy.
Which doesn't happen. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. The one thing I want to mention is we did not, you did not, other than the one YouTube video I posted a year ago, you did not have any idea what my top 15 was going to be. And also, this was originally number 3 on my list, and then our trip to Great Adventure made it number 4. So it was just a really weird kind of stroke of coincidence that we both ranked this coaster where we did.
Oh yeah, it was really, we were actually looking at it and we're like, wow, that's actually pretty funny. And Gabe is right because going to Great Adventure also changed my list slightly too, so it's really kind of amazing that I don't remember if this one moved or if it stayed the same, but moral of the story is they landed at the same spot in our lists, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. But without further ado, shall we introduce the champion?
Absolutely.
Okay. Introducing our championship fighter, standing at a height of 105 feet and reaching a top speed of 70 miles per hour. Hailing from the shores of Sandusky, Ohio and the Intamin Gym, it is Maverik. Today, our challengers for the championship fighter will be every coaster at Cedar Point. Let the fight begin. All right, so yeah, we both agreed that Maverik is the best coaster at Cedar Point, and I honestly don't think it's even close.
I think I would have to agree with that. The pacing on that thing is absolutely insane, and the launches are great. And as a funny side note, I also lost a phone on it, so it sort of, has a funny story with it too. So.
Yeah, so anyway, before we really get into this, I'm going to just list off some of the coasters that I consider notable at Cedar Point. Some of these we'll be going really in-depth on. Some of these we've already gone in-depth on. And some of them we'll just kind of gloss over too. I mean, we only have about an hour to talk about all these roller coasters. So first off is Blue Streak, which is their one wooden roller coaster. They have Gatekeeper, which would be their wing coaster. They have Gemini, which is an aero racing hybrid coaster, which is just a weird thing to say.
Right.
They have Magnum XL 200, which is their aero hyper coaster. Obviously Maverik, which is their Intamin Blitz coaster. Millennium Force, which is their Intamin Giga coaster. Raptor, which is their B&M Invert. They have Steel Vengeance, which is their RMC Hyper Hybrid. Then they have Valraven, which would be their B&M Dive Coaster. And then one coaster I like to mention is Rougarou, which is their B&M Floorless Coaster. Other than that, they also have Corkscrew, which is an aero looper, which is not my favorite ride there by any means. They have a couple of kiddie coasters. They have the new Wild Mouse as well, but we have not been able to experience that yet, so we probably won't touch on it too much. And then they have a mine ride as well, which is probably one of the worst mine rides I've ever been on. And then they also have a coaster in development known as Top Thrill 2, which we'll probably talk about a little bit. But we'll probably talk about more about the original Top Thrill dragster, because that's the one we've actually ridden.
Oh, yeah. So, to get this started, do you think we should talk about Maverik first and then go into the other ones, or don't matter?
Yeah, I think we should, just to kind of give a baseline of what we're comparing everything to. I think that would be a good idea.
Okay. Hold on, let me get to my Maverik notes.
Well, I can talk about it a little bit. So Maverik is their Intamin Blitz coaster. It only stands at about 105 feet. This roller coaster was constructed in 2007. So this was after Magnum XL, this was after Millennium Force, and this was after Top Thrill Dragster. This is kind of the tail end of the Coaster Wars. They broke the 400-foot mark, and it cost them way too much money, and they got an incredibly unreliable roller coaster. And they said, let's not do that anymore. Let's go really small, apparently. I guess that's the way to go now. So this is a Intamin Blitz coaster. It's one of the earlier versions of the Blitz coaster. I'm fairly certain on that. But it features a LSM launched lift hill, as well as the top speed is actually a 70 mile per hour launch, which is directly underneath the station. It's just a really cool ride experience. It's one of the most unique ride experiences at Cedar Point, I think. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's the best.
Oh, yeah. This thing, to speak to mine and Gabe's experience on this, we've taken 2 different trips to Cedar Point. And the first time that we went there, I didn't ride this roller coaster. I was younger. I wasn't quite the roller coaster enthusiast I am today. And I wasn't a big fan of corkscrews. And this one looked to me like it had corkscrews in it, so I didn't want to ride it. And Gabe, I think he was the only one in our whole group that did. Or, I don't remember why, okay? I didn't ride it.
The reason that we did not originally ride it is because when we got to the park, we've already ridden Millennium Forest, we've already ridden a couple other coasters, we got to the back of the park, and the wait time was like 2.5 hours. And I could not figure out why a roller coaster that was only 100 feet tall had a 2.5 hour wait. Like I couldn't figure out why. I had no idea why. This was before we were doing researches into the coasters. I was still in high school at this point. And yeah, we were just like, we're not gonna wait for this coaster for 2.5 hours. That's stupid. Let's go to the next one. And what ended up happening is this was one of the nights where they were open until like midnight or something like this. This is back before COVID, so they had like really extended hours. And it was getting towards the end of the night. You guys were all roller coastered out, and I said, screw it, I want to go back there and ride it. It's only an hour wait now. So I waited a full hour for this roller coaster. I got a night ride on this roller coaster for my first experience, and boy, was it a good one.
Oh, yeah. This is a really, really fun coaster. And to speak out, let's go into this layout of this ride. You start with 2 trains pulling out of the station. And we might even talk more about this station, but basically, to talk about what it does, is it has 2 trains loaded at the exact same time. And part of that is because of the design of these trains. There are only 3 cars, 2 rows of 2, which is a total of 13 riders. They're smaller trains. But, so, you start with 2 trains pulling out of the station at the same time. One is sent up the lift hill while the other kind of sits at the bottom. But as Gabe said, this is a launch coaster, an LSM launch. So you're launched up that lift hill, so you're not waiting for a slow train to pull up the first train while the other one just sits there and waits. You still get going pretty fast. So you get that launch up the first hill. It's 105 feet, it's 20 degrees, and you're then dropped down 100 feet at 95 degrees. So this guy is steeper than 90 degrees. And you have a couple of turns that lead you into the first airtime hill, which is a 74-foot tall airtime hill. And you get amazing floater on this thing, which leads you into a twisted horseshoe roll. And then a right turn leads you into that tunnel that is under the station. It's a 400-foot launch into 70 miles per hour, like Gabe was saying. And it is a rolling launch, which means you do come into it slower, but you're not completely stopped, depending on the conditions of the roller coaster. Because if you do hit it just right, due to block zones and trains and stuff, it might stop you there, but a lot of the times it's a rolling stop instead. And then a couple more turns leads you into the S-curve in the canyon. There's like facades and stuff. And to talk about this element just a little bit, it actually was originally a Heartline roll. But when they were testing the ride before they opened it, they decided that there was too much force, too many G's on the trains, decided it might be uncomfortable for riders and switched it out for this S-curve instead. Which you then get two overbanked turns. You get another airtime hill, which then leads you into the final brake run of this ride.
Yeah, the overbanked curves that you're talking about at the end, they're not really an overbanked curve. The traditional language they use for those two elements are the stangled dives. Basically, what that is it's an element that has it's a turn, but it kind of like as you come up into it, it kind of like flips you almost, and that's how you get like the quote unquote overbanked aspect of it. And what it is it's that really repetitive, super quick transition, and it kind of like flips you up, and then it kind of holds you there, almost kind of like a wave turn too, but not quite. And then it flips you back, so you have back to back super fast transitions, and you have two of those before the last little airtime hill heading up into the final breaks. And that's what this roller coaster is all about, are those super quick, fast transitions, fast pacing, throw you into every element as fast as possible. And that's really what this roller coaster is all about.
Oh yeah, we talk about it going into after the Coaster Wars or the Coaster Wars coming to an end. Coasters no longer were focusing on being the biggest, baddest, tallest, steepest, fastest thing out there. They were focused more on giving you an amazing, unique, intense experience, and that's what Maverik is. It whips you through this layout. Like Gabe said, it has crazy pacing. You do not have time to think. You're ripped through these transitions that just whip you in every direction. And you literally do not have time to think on this ride. And it is amazing from start to finish. And I think we have to talk about that second launch because that second launch is awesome. It doesn't seem like it because you don't go from 0 to 70, but even with that little bit of rolling in there, it's so good every time that I ride this ride.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this is a 70-mile-per-hour launch, and it kicks your butt. I'd say about 80% of the launch speed is like the first half of the launch track.
Oh, yeah.
And then the second half just kind of carries it through. But yeah, it's a very powerful launch. The cool thing I like about it is it's inside a tunnel built directly under the station. So it's completely enclosed, and it makes it feel almost a little bit quicker or a little bit faster just because like everything is so close to you and it's so compact that the speed feels faster than 70 miles per hour. It just does. And then you pop up into that really cool banked downward curve up over the pond. It's a super awesome like photo moment. And yeah, that launch is an awesome launch. It's one of my favorite launches I've been on, at least for LSM wise. And this roller coaster too, I think we got to talk about that first drop a little bit because it is probably the most powerful first drop that's only 100 feet like ever.
Oh my gosh, yeah. If most rides, like, for a good drop, you're like, bigger is better, obviously. But not with Maverik. It somehow packs a 250-foot straight down drop into only 100 feet. I don't know how it does it.
Well, some of it has to do with the LSM lift hill. So the lift hill launches you up the hill about 25 miles an hour. So by the time you get to the top, you're probably doing still almost 20 miles an hour. So most lift hills, as you crest over the top, you're probably only doing like 4 miles an hour coming off the chain lift or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or even like Top Thrill Dragster or King Ka, even though they're launch coasters, you still really crawl up over that top hat.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not that. It shoots you up over the first hill. And then the fact that it is 95 degrees, so it's beyond vertical slightly, it really packs a punch for only being 100 feet tall. And then my favorite part of the roller coaster comes immediately after that, which is the Camelback Airtime Hill. It is one of the most sustained airtime moments, and it's a violent airtime moment on any roller coaster. I think it starts to rival the El Toro airtime. I really do. And then it follows it up with some really cool transitions, two awesome inversions. I mean, I just can't say enough about this roller coaster. I really can't.
To talk about that first Camelback, I think back when we were talking about the Goliath CRG stall and how we felt like it just like it took forever to get through that element. I feel like that's a little bit of this lift hill. It is a really awesome violent ejector, but I feel like it goes longer than it's supposed to. And you have that natural expectation, and then you're still up there floating, and you're like, okay, can we go back down now, please?
Yeah. It's definitely one of the best moments on this coaster. But that's the thing about Maverik. It is packed full with standout, memorable moments. And when you get off this roller coaster, when you come into the final break, you just go, "Oh, holy cow! What just happened? Like, what did I just experience?"
Oh yeah.
Because not only is it super fast paced, but every element still, even though even every element only lasts maybe 2 or 3 seconds, they all stand out in your head. You can just remember them so vividly. And so to have that amount of pacing mixed with the fact that every element is a standout element really creates an ultra elite ride experience. And that's why we think it's the best at Cedar Point.
Oh yeah. And I think about, like, talking about elements that stand out and stuff. I think about that S curve too, and hearing, like, of course, Gabe did research the second time that we went through this park, and he was telling me about the zero G roll, and I was kind of disappointed that it was taken out, and I was like, kind of, okay, is this maybe going to be a dull spot in the ride? But no, that S curve is so freaking snappy, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, and that's probably why they had to take out the roll. Just because I can't imagine going, because you go through the 70-mile-an-hour launch, right?
Yep.
And you go up maybe like 65 feet, and then you come back down. So you're still carrying probably close to 65 miles an hour when you hit that S bend. So I couldn't imagine hitting that Heartline roll at like 65 miles an hour, because that's the true speed you enter it at. For perspective, the Heartline roll on Max Force at Six Flags Great America, which is the world's fastest inversion at 60 miles an hour, which has been also designed in like 2019, so quite a bit newer. And this inversion probably would have been faster than that. So, and that's, I think at that point, that's why they had to take it out. It was just too much strain. They basically said it was too much strain on the roller coaster train itself. It just, in 2007, when they built this roller coaster, the bearings and the technology and all that stuff in the trains just wasn't up to par on the forces they were throwing at it. And that's why they had to take it out, I think.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess we should probably maybe get talking at some of these other coasters. We're already 20 minutes in.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go first. One of my personal favorites at Cedar Point, and one that unfortunately didn't make either of our lists, but I really would like to talk about a little bit, is Valraven. Now, Valraven is a B&M dive coaster, and it's very, very interesting to me because instead of a normal roller coaster train, you have instead of 3 rows of 8. And so it looks more like a big car rather than a roller coaster train. And the other unique thing about this ride is once you come up to that drop, instead of coming and slowly inching and then just going over so nicely, no, what Valraven does instead, which in case you can't tell by my tone is something that I very much dislike, it comes to the very, very edge, goes over like 2 feet, and then just stops and hangs you there for a few seconds before then dropping in to that drop. And I hate it every single time. It is super terrifying to me, but it also makes for a crazy ride experience that you don't get on any other roller coaster. I personally have not ridden anything else that just stops you on the drop to be like, hey, here's the drop that you're about to go down, and then releases you.
Yeah, the one thing, there's two things to note about Valraven. So number one, it is the full size dive coaster. What that means is it's the larger train and it's the larger track. So B&M actually makes 2 versions of the dive coaster now. They make the full size and they make the mini version. A good example of the mini version would be like the cliffhanger ride at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. The other reason I mention this is because it also means being the full size, it is over 200 feet.
Oh,
so
yeah.
This is a hyper coaster. So if you can imagine, and what she's talking about is going into the brake hold, you're 200 feet in the air. Like, you're way up there. Like, it's not just a little bit up there. You're 200 and, I think, was it 223 feet in the air?
Yes, sir.
So that's nothing to squawk about at all. I think it's one of the more underrated rides at Cedar Point. I think it kind of gets buried in this lineup of really, really good coasters. The dive coasters for me are just not quite as thrilling because I have zero fear of heights unlike you. So the whole, hanging up over the drop, for me, it's just kind of a gimmick. But for someone who is like truly afraid of heights, this is a very thrilling coaster for you.
Oh yeah, 100%. And to really talk about this ride just a little bit is because it is a dive coaster, you do have inversions on this ride. This one specifically has 2. And so what I think really gets with this ride is it has the feel of like a B&M Hyper, but then you also have a couple inversions and you have a little bit different of a ride experience. And I think Gabe's right. It gets kind of buried because it's not a top tier, like super high end roller coaster. It's just a lot of fun. And the first drop is really good, but the rest of the coaster layout, it's not bad. I'm not saying it's a bad coaster. I'm just saying it's really hard for this coaster to stand out as something amazing because of the park that it's at.
Oh, absolutely. One of the coasters that I wanted to take some time and talk about, and this is kind of a coaster that is, it's a little controversial, I think, and that is Blue Streak. I absolutely freaking love Blue Streak. I could ride that coaster 500 times and never get bored of it. So Blue Streak is the only full wooden roller coaster still at Cedar Point. And it was constructed in 1964 by a company known as PTC. So everybody knows PTC as the company that makes wooden roller coaster trains, but back in the day, they actually made roller coasters too. And this is one of them. This roller coaster only has a drop of 72 feet, and it only stands at 40 miles per hour. But it gives you some good airtime. I don't care what anybody says. Like, you get some really good floater airtime. I love the fact that this roller coaster is like almost 60 years old at this point. And the fact that it's still standing and still operating is super, super cool. But I also really love the ride experience.
Oh yeah. And since Gabe mentioned this ride, I feel we have a responsibility to mention the history of this ride. So being built in 1964, it is an ACE landmark roller coaster. But then on top of that, if you kind of go into the history of Cedar Point itself, it really was sort of a milestone for Cedar Point itself. Before 1964, they had built other rides, but when they built Blue Streak, they also built a couple other roller coasters, some more rides, and it really kind of veered Cedar Point into this direction to start on the path of the roller coaster capital that we know of to this day. So I really think it's important, not only as a roller coaster itself, but also in the history of Cedar Point to the park that we know it is today.
Oh, absolutely. Blue Streak for me is definitely a must ride. Just being one of the oldest rides in the park. It's even older than their mine train, which is just kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, and it's a PTC. That's the other thing. PTC only made like I think 4 or 5 actual roller coasters, and I believe it's the only PTC still standing today. And that alone is a super cool feat, I think. With that, I think we should transition into another roller coaster that I want to talk about, and that would be Gatekeeper. One of the most underrated roller coasters at Cedar Point, even more so than Valraven, I think. Gatekeeper is their B&M wing coaster, and it is one of the best wing coasters out there on the planet, I think. It stands at 170 feet. It has a drop of 164 feet. It reaches a top speed of 67 miles per hour. And the thing I love about this roller coaster is it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inversions, which is crazy for a B&M wing coaster. Usually they only have like 3 or 4. And I just love this layout from start to finish.
So the first wing coaster that I've ever ridden was X-Flight at Six Flags, Great America. And again, that's not one that I didn't think it was bad, but I also was like, this isn't really my favorite thing either. And so when I heard that they had something similar at Cedar Point, I was kind of like, oh, okay, it's another one to ride. It'll probably be fun. But like, it's it's a really good ride. You get some good G's on this thing, and you really fly through this layout, and it seems so much bigger than X-Flight is. And I think part of that is just X-Flight is kind of a pretty compact in the back area of the park where it's built, where Gatekeeper, literally as its name suggests, goes directly over the front gates to enter Cedar Point. So not only does that like just make it feel bigger, but it's also a really like picturesque ride. It's really cool because you will never miss this thing as it goes right over the entrance to the park.
Well, it feels bigger because it actually is bigger by like a lot. It's got almost 1,000 more feet of track than X Flight, and it's also 50 feet taller. So it seriously is just a bigger ride. The thing I like to say about this roller coaster is it's the definition of graceful. Like it's just such a graceful, flowing experience. Like it's not. I wouldn't call it intense. I don't think that'd be the right word to describe it. But it's not bad because of that. It's just so graceful. It kind of like carries you through, like super gently through each inversion, and even like the G forces and the airtime are applied to you really gently wise. And it's just a graceful, kind of flowing experience, and it seriously feels like you're flying. Like that's the best way to describe it. And I think it seriously is an underrated ride at Cedar Point, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. So that's why I wanted to mention it here.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually a really fun ride. And the nice thing is that with it being at the entrance to the park, it's a really great way to start your day. And then like Gabe said, because it isn't a super intense ride, you don't instantly like feel tired after riding this thing. It's a really good way to start your day if you're going to this park. And it is so much fun just to ride this ride.
Oh, for sure, for sure. What coaster would you like to mention next?
I do want to talk about, where is it? Sorry. Raptor, that's the one that I wanted to talk about because as you've heard in previous episodes, I do like the B&M inverts. So this is a B&M invert that was built in 1994. It's 137 feet tall. It's got a 119-foot drop. And this was actually a really good B&M invert when we went there. And part of that is just, it's an early B&M, and then on top of that, it's an original layout. And it was just a really good ride. And I remember riding it, and of course, inevitably, like I said before, I compare everything back to the original Batman, and this thing is, I think, just as good. It was a really great ride.
Best way I would describe Raptor, I think the closest similarity wise would actually be my favorite being up in Vermont too. They're both very intense. I think the biggest thing that I hate about Raptor is its pacing is just a little bit wrong. Like, it just feels incorrect. When you go through the layout, like the way and some of this has to do with like the pathways they had to guide the roller coaster over, and some of the space restraints they had. Also, the fact that Montu, they could just dig a hole whenever they needed to, which they couldn't do with this roller coaster. It just, from one element to the next, it seems like the space is almost just like a little bit too much. They're not quite, each element is just, there's too much emptiness between each one of them. I think that's the biggest reason why I don't consider this to be on the same level as Montu. But comparing it to like Batman clones, or even like Alpine Geist or like the Great Bear, I would consider this quite a bit better than those roller coasters. It's definitely up there. It's just not quite the same level as like a Banshee or a Montu, in my opinion.
Yeah, if we go into this layout, it's a turn out of the station that leads you into that 137-foot lift hill, which then has a curved drop down into the 119-foot drop, goodness gracious, which leads into a 100-foot vertical loop. You then go through a zero-G roll, a cobra roll, which then leads into an upward spiral that leads into the mid-course brake run, and you dive down to the right into a straight piece of track that leads into the first corkscrew of the ride. You then have a right turn, a small dip, that then leads into the second corkscrew. You have a final helix, a left turn that leads you into the final break. And as you heard me say in there are a few places on this ride that has that straight pieces of track. And so, like Gabe said, it doesn't have quite the same intense pacing as some other B&M hypers. So it's not quite as high as like the top ones, but it's not quite as low as the low ones. So it's a really good middle ground. And I really love B&M hypers, goodness gracious, inverts, so that's why I like this ride.
One thing to keep in mind, though, this is a 1994 invert, so it's one of the earliest inverts. Like, this is when they first started making them. Mm-hmm. And for them to get this kind of ride experience with, like, the third or fourth attempt is pretty damn good, in my opinion. I really can't hate on that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It's just not, for me, and once again, B&M inverts in general are not my favorite. So, for me to appreciate this coaster definitely tells you how good of a ride experience it is. But with that, I think we should talk about the original Top Thrill Dragster.
Ooh, okay, I like that idea.
So, me and you have a unique experience on Top Thrill Dragster, because we've got to watch this thing roll back 18 times before we rode it.
Oh my god, yes.
And then we also have a night ride experience on this roller coaster as well.
Yeah.
Which is a awesome thing to do. Once the new one opens, I highly recommend getting night rides on this coaster, because when you get to the top and the view of all of the lights on the island, it's just so gorgeous. But I think they ruined it. I really do. I think they ruined the roller coaster. Let's hear your thoughts on the original before we talk about the new one, I guess.
All right. The original, excluding the Mummy down in Florida, I think this would be my first really intense launch coaster. And to go from the Mummy, which launches you to a maximum of 40 miles per hour, to go from that to 120 miles per hour to 420 feet is a slightly big jump. And that first launch is absolute insanity. And if you've listened to mine and Gabe's King to Ka episode, I actually liked Top Thrill's launch better than I liked King to Ka's. and it's just so sad. So, oh my gosh, I cannot talk. So snappy, so smooth, and for it to be my first experience on this kind of ride, it just absolutely blew me out of the water. I was like, I don't even know what this thing is. Me and Gabe rode it a whole bunch of times, and it's just stupid. That's what it is. It's stupid and it's amazing at the same time.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. The one thing that was fun when we were there is we ended up stuck in a good old fashioned Midwestern thunderstorm that lasted about 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and what happened was is we were waiting in line for this roller coaster. It was like a 3 hour wait, which it always has been at Cedar Point, and we were waiting in line, waiting in line. It started raining, right, and for some reason, everybody just left.
Wait. When Gabe says raining, you have to understand it was this little cloud that literally popped over us, stayed there for the 20 minutes, dumped the entirety of Lake Superior on top of us, and then moved on its way. But anyways.
But yeah, so everybody left. Everybody exited the queue line, right? And we were like soaked at this point because we were like one of the few people that didn't have like a little shade cover over us. So like we were like completely soaked. And I told her, I said, I ain't leaving. I'm like, I got soaked. I'm riding this damn thing, right? Well, of course, because it was a thunderstorm, they have to wait like the 30 minutes or whatever for lightning to clear before they can open the ride. And then, of course, the launch track was completely covered in water. So what happened is to basically clear the water and everything off the track, they started launching the train empty. And every time it would make it like 3/4 of the way up, and then it would roll back. And then the people started joining us in line now that the rain was going. And then they would launch it again, and it would go up a little bit higher. And everybody would go like, oh, it's going to make it. Oh, no, it didn't. And it did this like 20 times. Like, it kept coming back to the station. And every time people were getting like more and more excited, hoping that it was going to break the top. Because once it broke the top, then it would open. And it was just a really fun experience because like everybody was like in on it together. It was like one of those crowd moments, you know? And then to top it all off, we were the first people to ride it once it reopened. So then we were hoping for a rollback ourselves, which we did not get one. We did not get one, unfortunately. But we still got to watch that experience. It was a really fun time. It's a very memorable roller coaster moment for me, at least.
Oh, I 100% agree. And talking about rollbacks for just a little bit, I always love telling non-roller coaster people about this ride and explaining the rollbacks and stuff. So then, of course, you get curious and you're like thinking about it and you're like, well, what happens if they get stuck at the top? Like, what if it's like absolutely perfect conditions and they just come to a gentle rest right at the top? So I was looking at it, and this has happened 3 times in the history when Top Thrill was open. And so, of course, I'm like, well, what do they do? And well, so the roller coaster engineer has to climb up the little ladder 420 feet into the air, and he just pushes you. It's the most hilarious.
That would be a crazy experience to get like stuck at the top, you know, like 400 feet in the air, and you're just perched perfectly up there. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine. I don't even know how that would happen, but apparently it has.
Yeah,
But we definitely have to talk about the new and improved Top Thrill 2.
Yeah, you know more about what they're actually gonna do to it.
It's stupid! It's stupid! I hate them for it. I absolutely cannot respect Cedar Point for this move at all. It's a cash grab. They're just trying to get more people into the park. They cheaped out on it. It's so frustrating because I know what this roller coaster could have been. And they just didn't do it. They had an opportunity to make this into a top tier, like ultra elite. Like they had a chance to turn Top Thrill Dragster into a #1 potential coaster in the world. And they just kind of like, no, we're just going to take out the launch, which is the best part of the ride. We're going to put some LSMs in there, and then we'll throw a spike on it and call it good. That's all we need to do. It's a new ride. And I just, like, they didn't even take the time to, like, put in an airtime moment in the launch, like a Pantheon has, or I think even, like, some of the multi-launch coasters in Europe have, like, the little airtime pop during the launch. And I'm like, they couldn't even do that to make it a better ride experience. I'm really disappointed. The best part about Top Thrill Dragster was the launch. I don't care what anybody says.
Oh, yeah.
The launch was the best part. And they took that out. It's not LSMs, and the initial launch is going to be 70 miles an hour, which is a good number. Don't get me wrong. 70 miles an hour is a good number. But compared to the original number of 120 or 120 miles per hour, it's not the same. It's just not the same. And I know the vertical spike is going to be exciting, getting shot backwards at 100 miles an hour is going to be pretty cool.
Wait. For a second. Pause. I know you're excited, but okay, so the original layout of this ride, it was 120 mile per hour launch that launched you straight up into a 420-foot top hat that then had, then a vertical twist on the way back down?
Yeah, 270-degree twist on your way down.
Yeah, okay. So that was the original layout of this ride. And like Gabe said, the crowning jewel of this thing was that freaking launch. So now explain what the new design of this ride is.
Yeah, so the new design is going to be a little bit different. So basically, you'll roll out of the station through a switch track. And what will happen is that switch track will close behind you, and you'll get launched 74 miles per hour is the actual number, forward, up the top hat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll get you about halfway up the top hat, and then you're going to actually slow to a stop, and then roll backwards. And you'll roll backwards into the launch track that you initially started on, and you'll get launched 100 miles per hour in the opposite direction, basically backwards. And then from there, you go backwards up a 400 tall vertical spike, which is the tallest in the world, and it is going to be a cool moment, don't get me wrong. From there, you'll stall out at the top of the spike, and you'll roll forward, back through the launch track for a third time, getting to a top speed of 120 miles an hour, which was the original top speed of Top Thrill Dragster. And that'll get you up over the top hat and down through the twist, so the twist is still going to be there, and then into the final breaks. And I just think they had so much potential here. They could have put some kind of airtime moment during the launch. That's what I was really hoping for. Is so like the launch track, instead of just being a straight piece of track with LSMs on it, it actually have like an airtime hill curve to it. And then I was hoping they were going to extend the layout with maybe another airtime hill, kind of like King the Ka. I know they don't quite have the space for it, but I think they could have done it. I really do. And I just think if you put, an airtime hill over the launch, you put an airtime hill and maybe some kind of another element like a helix or something, you could have made this into a top tier, like number one roller coaster. And then my other biggest complaint is the initial launch is only 70 miles per hour, which, like I said, is a good number, but I think they could have done better. I think they could have had that initial launch maybe be 100 miles per hour. And instead of just barely creeping up the top hat, maybe you get almost to the top and then roll back. I think that would have been such a more exciting experience. And other roller coaster enthusiasts have proven that the LSM technology is capable of getting 200 miles per hour in that space. And I think that's what they should have done. I'm just disappointed with how they decided to go about doing this, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. First thing, 100% agree. And I think what they're trying to do in this sort of design is maybe capitalize on that rollback situation, and how, like, as me and Gabe said, we were hoping so hard that we had that rollback, but where that allure came in is because you almost reached the top, and then you would roll back the whole entire, 400 feet maybe, where, as Gabe is saying, in this first instance, it's only going to be about halfway up that top hat. And granted, you are going to have that vertical spike, but as you come back down, you're going to be facing forward, so it's not going to be backwards. I happen to agree with Gabe. I think if, like, this had been the first ride that they'd put in, it would be totally fine. It would probably be amazing. It would be a great pull and people wouldn't be as mad about it. But the problem is that they already had a really great ride and then this is what they're replacing it for. And again, like me and Gabe said, we don't want to necessarily say that it's going to be bad, but we were hoping for so much more from this redesign and we were all going crazy with like the millions of different things they could have done with it. And then when this is what they came out with, we're like, oh. But don't get us wrong, we're gonna go there and we're gonna ride it because you have to, but we don't have high expectations for it, let's just say that.
I still think it's gonna be a fun experience. I just don't think it's a potential number one ride in the park. I don't see this dethroning Maverik. And that's what I was hoping for. I was hoping for a roller coaster that would be better than Maverik, and I just don't think they did it. I just don't think it. But I have heard rumors about another roller coaster potentially in 2025.
Ooh.
So maybe they're saving their money for something even bigger, better, badder. Who knows? But I just when you think about Cedar Point, you think about the best. Like that's what Cedar Point is, and this roller coaster just is not at the Cedar Point level. I just don't think it's there. So. But yeah, is there any other roller coasters that we should talk about before we kind of wrap this up? Or
I know we've already talked about it in a previous episode. We don't have to go quite as in depth, but when we're talking about the number one coaster at Cedar Point, we inevitably have to address this because it is a controversy. We have to talk about Steel Vengeance.
No, we don't. No, we don't. We can just. I was trying to completely ignore it this whole time.
I will talk about this then. It did make my top 15. And, actually talking about this ride, and I didn't get to mention it too much in my actual episode, is that this was actually, like, even the theme was meant to be a counterpart to Maverik. The whole theme behind this ride was that it was supposed to be, so Maverik is like an outlaw who came into the part of the park where it's built and kind of ran these guys out of town, and what Steel Vengeance is three guys coming back trying to take back the territory from Maverik. Well, Maverik beat the crap out of them and kicked them back out of town. Sorry.
Well, I can definitely see the inspiration in Steel Vengeance, though. I can definitely see it because it has, kind of like Maverik, those weird and wacky inversions that aren't quite your typical inversion. You can see the pacing-wise, they're both really good pace-wise. You can see kind of like the back-to-back transitions that they were trying to get out of it that just didn't quite hit as hard as what Maverik did. So you can see the inspiration. You can see it there. I think like I said, the biggest problem with Steel Vengeance is the same reason I love Magnum. I was thinking about this the other day. is the repetitiveness of the roller coaster. My biggest issue with Steel Vengeance is riding other RMCs and knowing what RMC is capable of. I just feel like they could have done more even with this layout than what they did. It was kind of a gimmick going for the whole 30 seconds of airtime, which is a record. That's what they were trying to do with this roller coaster. I think they could have done it in a little bit better way. When it really comes down to the nitty-gritty, Steel Vengeance is still a top 3 roller coaster in this park. So if I was going to rank all of the top 3 at Cedar Point, I would put Maverik at number 1. I would put Magnum XL 200 at number 2. I would put Steel Vengeance at number 3. Honestly, I would. I like to talk a lot of crap about Steel Vengeance because I just think that people say it's the best coaster in the world, and I don't even think it's the best coaster at Cedar Point. So that's why I talk about it the way I do.
Yeah, don't let Gabe's, ragging on this thing convince you that it's a horrible ride. It's not. It's a good ride. It's just like you said. It's not what we think is the best out there. We think it has its issues. And, I think we keep talking about, our first experiences with rides. I think we have to talk about that a little bit and maybe how it's clouded our judgment of this ride. But me and Gabe got a really, really crappy first ride on Steel Vengeance. We literally got off it and were even more mad than when we got onto it. And just like to explain.
Well, it was just a combination. It was one of those comedy of errors kind of moments, you know? You lost your cell phone. We ended up having to pay. They forced us to pay for a locker. And then we found out there was lockers for free on the ride. Like, it was just that's the other thing with this coaster. The way they run the, like, ride ops and the fact that they force you to buy a locker because you can't bring a bag, but then they give you free lockers. It's like, my bag would have fit in the free ones. Like, why did I have to pay for a freaking locker? And I know it sounds like I'm a cheap bastard, but, like, at the end of the day, it was just a frustrating thing for us. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I will say that, but we got multiple rides on this. Like, it wasn't just one ride.
Yeah.
So, and even with the multiple rides, it still didn't impress me as much as I thought it should.
Yes. Well, and then I was going to say that our first ride on it, too, was not in the back row. Back row makes a big difference on this ride and definitely increases that ride experience considerably. I do remember that. Because, like I said, we got in a better mood, we rode some other coasters, we rode Maverik a couple times, then we came back and we rode it in the back row, and we're like, okay, it's not as bad as we were trying to make it seem before, so it's definitely... Back row ride makes it way better, and it really was an actually really good ride experience. And as much as we like to give this ride crap, I do think it actually has a pretty good first drop, which gives it some points in my book.
Yeah, the first two elements, the first drop and the outer banked airtime hill, are two of the best elements I've ever experienced. It's just the rest of the ride experience after those two elements doesn't live up to the same level. And that's really what I can't get past on this roller coasters. I know the potential. Like, the first two elements are awesome. It's some of the best roller coaster moments out there. It's just after that, I think they could have continued with that, and they just didn't. But yeah, I think, so we are going towards our time here. We're almost reaching an hour. I want you to rank your top 5 at Cedar Point. Can you do that for me?
My top 5?
Yes, your top 5 at Cedar Point.
Okay. So number 1, I think, would be Maverik. Number 2... Goodness gracious. I think actually Top Thrill would be my number 2 at Cedar Point. I really, really loved Top Thrill when I was there. Number 3, I think, would be Steel Vengeance. Number 4 would be Millennium. And number 5 would be Raptor. I think that would be my top 5.
Okay, yeah. So you don't rank Magnum at all in your top 5, really?
No, it didn't even make my top 15.
I know. I'm one of the cult followers for that ride. So
I think it would be one of those things where I guess maybe like Magnum and Millennium would be like on the same level for me. So if I had to pick between the two, Millennium would sit there. So
yeah, that's fair. So I already listed my top 3. I'm going to edit it just a slight bit. So yeah, I put obviously Maverik at number 1, and for me it's not even close. Maverik is my baby. Like, that is my guy. That's my roller coaster. It is not my number 1, but it is pretty damn close. The competition for my number 1 spot is tough. So the fact that it is number 4 on my list says a lot about this ride. So I put Maverik at number 1. Like I said, Magnum XL 200 at number 2. I'm going to take Millennium Force and Steel Vengeance. I'm actually going to tie them for number 3.
Okay.
They're both kind of on the same level for me. I really do. And then my number 5 would actually have to be Gemini, just because of the historical aspect, and then it's just such a fun ride. I just love it so much.
That's a good point.
It just puts a smile on your face. And then if you sit, like, on the right side of the train, you can, like, high-five people as you're on the roller coaster.
I literally was just about to mention that. I was going to be like, it's so much fun to high-five people.
I would also like to do an honorable mention. And my honorable mention would have to be Blue Streak. That's another coaster that just puts a smile on my face every time I ride it.
And you see, so I did some research into Blue Streak. I just got to talk about this for a little bit, because I have ridden another really, really old wooden roller coaster at Hershey Park, and I am spacing on the name right now. But it was built in I think it was like 1946 or something crazy. It's a really, really old ride, and it still has buzz bars. And Blue Streak used to have buzz bars, and so a little part of me is like, I wish it still had them, because it would make it such a fun experience.
Oh, absolutely. It would definitely be a lot of fun. It's definitely like it has airtime. Like it really
Oh
does.
yeah.
What would your honorable mention be? Maybe not a coaster that would even make your list, but just something that's just your favorite.
It probably would be Valraven, and that first drop is really, really good. But then cause inevitably I must speak of it, is the theming. And Valraven has really cool theming, and I'm like, I have no idea where the hell this came from. But Valraven is actually from Danish folklore, and it's called the Raven of the Slain. And so they're ravens that have eaten the meat of the dead and they gain human knowledge, they get superhuman powers, and they're these terrible little creatures that mislead people and play tricks on people. And they also can weirdly turn into a knight if they consume the blood of a child. So I'm like, where the hell did this come from? But it's just a really cool story. It's got really dark, like, spooky theming over there. So that would be my honorable mention. I really love that.
All right. And then we have to do it. Which is the worst roller coaster at Cedar Point?
I gotta look through our list. Hold on a second. Because
I know what I'm going to say. It's Corkscrew. Corkscrew is absolutely atrocious, and they need to tear that thing out and put a new one in. And for a guy that loves history, and the fact that I still hate Corkscrew tells you how bad of a ride experience it actually is. It's just not fun.
it's so funny, because just as you said that, I was like, oh, probably Corkscrew. And then you said that, and I'm like, yeah, very much.
Yeah, I would even put Cedar Creek Mine Ride over Corkscrew.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not a good mine train. It's just, the thing with Corkscrew is it only has one loop, and then it has the corkscrews. It's just so short, and it's one of the most uncomfortable. Like, how long is it? It's probably only like 2,000 feet of track, I bet.
Oh, I don't even know that I did any research on Corkscrew, honestly.
Yeah, and it's the most painful, like, 2,000 feet of track on planet Earth, I swear. It's just not fun. It's probably going to be the next coaster they tear out if I had it to guess, just because of its age. And it's only 2,050 feet of track. So yeah, it's 2,050 feet of track, and it's just so outdated and so rough and uncomfortable. I think it's time to retire this roller coaster. There are better aero loopers out there than this one. I think it's time. I really do. I think it's time to retire this guy.
Oh, yeah. The only thing I will say about this ride that I can give it a slight compliment on is just the way it looks. And that's because it has the white supports with dark blue track, and then the corkscrew that Gabe's talking about goes over one of the walking paths. So it's very picturesque, and you're like, oh, that looks cool. And then you go ride it, and you're like, wow, never, ever again.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's time to give this guy the old retirement treatment and find something else. Maybe like a mock. You know what I'd really like to see would be like a mock spinning launch coaster, something like Coaster Time Traveler out at Silver Dollar City. That would be awesome to see at Cedar Point. I would like to see some kind of launch coaster. I think they need another launch coaster here at Cedar Point. I would love to see like an S&S air launch, like something like Max Force at Cedar Point, but like 200 feet tall. That'd be cool.
That would be awesome.
They have a lot of options, that's for sure. Even you know, people talked about the whole RMC T-Rex, 500 feet, capable. You know,
Dang.
the next step in coaster evolution. I don't know where the hell they'd put a 500-foot tall coaster. They can figure it out, I guess. Put it out in the water.
Right?
Yeah, Lake Erie you can build on.
Yeah, so this is just a little tidbit. When me and Gabe talk about Cedar Point, in case people don't know, it's built on a peninsula that's basically an island out in the middle of Lake Erie. So the problem that Cedar Point is running into right now is they don't have any more room left. So their only choice is to, like Gabe said, they're gonna have to start building out in the water, or they gotta tear out coasters to put new ones in. And as Gabe was saying, Corkscrew really doesn't occupy too much space, so they're going to be limited with what they might possibly be able to put in there. But I'm hoping that Cedar Point can figure something out and keep updating their roller coasters without having to get rid of too many of them. At this point, at
Yeah,
least.
for sure. The thing with Corkscrew is there is some other stuff that they don't currently use, like some buildings and stuff that are vacant that they could tear down and get some more space. But yeah, like the whole rumor of the 500-foot tall, RMC T Rex, because they say that according to RMC, the T Rex track, which is be their upgraded version of the Raptor track, is capable of going up over 500 feet. Now, obviously, since they have declared that, they haven't even built a single one of them yet. And they still are having issues with their Raptor models. So I don't know if that's just obviously kind of a stupid rumor that some coaster enthusiasts spread. But if that were to happen at Cedar Point, that would be crazy. Like I'd be booking my ticket to fly out there like the next day just to see them build the dang thing. Like that would be cool to see. But I just don't see it in the future. I hope they do get something new, something a little bit better than what they're doing with Top Thrill. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think with that T-Rex rack, maybe track, sorry. I think what it was is they had maybe higher hopes for their Raptor tracks, and theoretically it probably can, but the problem with building something that's 500 feet is it's also going to cost a ton of freaking money. So you also have to think about that aspect of it when building roller coasters is you got to find someone who's going to want to invest that money in it too.
Oh, absolutely. With that, we've hit our 1 hour mark here, according to my little timer. So, is it unanimous? Maverik is still the best ride at Cedar Point here?
100%. It is. There's no contest, like you said, unfortunately, the other rides. And
Yeah.
you know what? I think that, again, speaks to the caliber of roller coaster that Maverik is, though, because the lineup at Cedar Point is nothing to squawk at. I mean, all of these coasters are really great coasters, and for Maverik to stand at the top of that heap and for it to be 10 miles above everything else there, really just, it's an amazing roller coaster.
When you talk about this lineup a little bit, Magnum, elite. Millennium Force is elite. Steel Vengeance is still, I would consider, elite. Val Raven I consider great. And Top Thrill, elite. So there's multiple elite coasters in this park. I would just put Maverik in the ultra elite category. And that's just that one step above everybody else. But yeah, this is a stacked lineup. 18 coasters in total, a few kiddie coasters, But it's a stacked lineup. Multiple B&Ms, multiple Intamins, multiple Arrows. And it's a good lineup. It really is. So the fact that Maverik is the best at Cedar Point tells you a lot about that ride experience.
Oh, yeah. But with that, I think we've come to a unanimous decision that Maverik stands at the top. And, we didn't talk about what we're going to name our next week's episode.
I don't even know what it is. Is that, Oh, I think I know. Hold on, let me look.
It's a certain, well, I don't want to give it away like I did with the...
with the one episode, the Steel Vengeance episode. Here, let me look quick. Let me pull it up in my screenshots. Oh, I don't even know.
The problem is I haven't ridden your coaster, so I don't even know what to call it.
Yeah, well, it's a big coaster. We could call it the terrain coaster versus the giant coaster. How about that?
Okay.
Super simple, easy, because that's really what these two coasters are. One's a terrain coaster, one is a massive, giant coaster.
Okay.
So yeah, terrain versus the giant.
Okay, I like that name. It sounds snappy too. So, everyone join us next week for that episode. It's going to be an interesting one. Dang.
It definitely is going to be an interesting one.